I'm flying Ryan Gokers along with.
Ample motor mouth Joel Verlin. Got to turn down my volume a little bit there.
Yeah, I went a little loud. It was a bit much. Anywho, we are back to recap week number 2 because
More like
yet another super predictable week of football.
more like crap in some cases.
Yeah, I'm bad at picking games, especially early season. But
Oh, I know, because
it's great.
you had week 1. It set me up, and you're like, I'm freaking Nostradamus, right? You know, when you have that kind of week where it mostly, not all the way,
I
but
don't know what that week's like, Joel, because my week last week sucked too.
mostly tends to go your way, and you're like, okay, I'll take that. And then you have last week, which was like, ha ha. So you think you know how to predict football, huh? Sucks to be you.
Yeah, and I was talking to Joel before we started about a fantasy team on the board behind me, which is updated, that has a super flex starter set of Bo Nix and Daniel Jones. And if I asked you to pick which team you think that was, I guarantee you're wrong because it is a 2-0 team for some reason.
Because Ryan is
Thank
a
you, Alvin
believer
Kamara.
this week.
I'm a Bo lever in general. I think he's going to be really good. It's just there's not much there around him right now. And it'll get better. Football's weird, guys. Panthers, Ravens, same record through 2 weeks like we all expected.
Wow, and how about the Commanders atop of their division?
Yeah, Commanders in first place in the division. You've got the Saints, of course, the highest scoring offense as we all
Vikings,
predicted.
Vikings in a 2-0. Sam Darnold.
Yeah, Sam Darnold looking like a potential MVP candidate early in the season. Vikings are 2-0. The Steelers behind Justin Fields, even though I think they have a combined 31 points in 2 games. 2-0.
Bears.
The Bears suck.
Yeah,
The
they're
Bears still
normal.
suck.
The Bears
Bears
still
still
suck. Dun.
Yeah. I think the Bears have one offensive touchdown through 2 games and find themselves somehow at 1-1. Good defense, terrible offense.
Oh, and then of course you had Patriots kind of came back to they almost won, but they came back to earth.
Patriots have been interesting. I mean, beating the Bengals hung tough with the Chiefs. Maybe the Bengals had an off week 1. We don't know yet. We don't know these teams well enough. Week
Jamar
2, hanging with the 2-0
Jamar Chase
Seahawks.
Jamar Chase getting a little bit animated, shall we say?
Just a little bit. Let's go over some news. Not practicing for the Texans today. Nico Collins and Joe Mixon. Of course, Joe Mixon rolled up on Sunday night. Ankle
Yeah,
injury
they're,
doesn't look to be long term, but
yeah,
this
they're
week is
saying
in
it's
question.
not season ending. Thank God.
Yeah, it sounds more like if he misses this week, which is not a given, next week you likely will be back. Vikings, Justin Jefferson and Aaron Jones both limited. Of course, Jefferson with a quad injury that is not as significant as it once appeared. Jordan Addison looks like he will be coming back soon as well. A.J. Brown, going to miss at least 2 weeks per what he said, but at least they ruled him out early so you can make those changes, unlike Christian McCaffrey that waited till 90 minutes before
Okay,
Monday Night Football.
okay. We've got to ask the question because I was listening to at least 2 or 3 shows yesterday. So, do you place the Eagles' loss blame on Sirianni, Barkley, or the defense?
I mean, there's blame all around. I don't think you blame Sirianni for that play call where Barkley gets hit in the hands and drops it, because if Barkley catches it, the game is over. I think you can blame Sirianni on some other decisions earlier in the game that may have cost him some points, and then the defense just absolutely wilting. Not a good look. I do think a lot of the blame from most people will go to Saquon Barkley because he dropped a pass, but at the same time, you're paying him millions of dollars. He's got to make that play, but he can also hand it off. It's not like the Falcons were stopping you on the ground. So I think there's a good amount of blame to go around. I would say Sirianni, of course, the head coach, should get the most blame. But it also goes beyond just that decision. I think you go earlier in the game. I think they passed on a field goal attempt and failed on 4th down or something like that. And it's just, These coaches that get too cute and, oh, I'm going to go for it because I have to do that. And it doesn't work. And they lose by less than 3 when you could have had a field goal.
Yeah,
It just makes you wonder if that's really the right decision in the
Detroit
NFL.
Lions getting shocked by Tampa Bay at Ford Field, definitely another case in point.
Yeah, I mean, not getting that field goal at the end of the first half, and then late in the game, a couple of interceptions and bad plays where they were in field goal range once again. You get both of those. Maybe, again, you start changing the score in the situation, the rest of the game's going to change with it. But
And,
you put 6 more points up for the Lions, mathematically, the Bucs have to do something else to win.
and can you imagine how much the frost and the chill was at Jerry World after the Cowboys get embarrassed by not just lose, get embarrassed by the Saints.
Yeah, Alvin Kamara 4 touchdowns, just absolutely blitzing the Cowboys. We'll go over all the games in a little bit of detail here in a second. Back to some news. Amon-Ra St. Brown listed as a full participant, had a little quad bruise thing against the Bucs. He didn't really miss any time in the game, but it's a star player, and there's been a lot of star players hurt. The Rams, Cooper Kupp looks like he's going to IR to join Puka Nacua. So
Number 1 and number 2 for the Rams as of just the second year in a row. Because I remember that's how Cooper Kupp started off last year, and it's Groundhog Day.
yeah, not great. We'll see what that means for Kyron Williams and Matt Stafford. Going to be a lot of depth pieces playing critical roles. Deebo Samuel not going to practice, expected to miss a couple weeks with a calf strain. Russell Wilson limited in practice, but still not expected to start this week, which is an interesting situation because I do think he's the better quarterback on that roster for what that team needs. Again, 31 points in 2 weeks against not great competition. But that's the big one. Cooper Kupp going to be out for a couple weeks. It looks like Tua going to IR just to make sure his brain can heal properly.
And, of course, Pacheco.
Isaiah Pacheco, a fractured fibula. He's going to miss 6 to 8 weeks. The Chiefs have re-signed Kareem Hunt right now on the practice squad. Carson Steele looks to be the starter this week with Samaje Perine probably being the passing down work, and then we'll see what happens.
I don't know after how
with
Perine did last season how much you trust Perine. He just didn't really inspire me all that much.
I'll say this. I have been going after Steele and Hunt more than Perine. Fantasy footballers, Jason Wright did say if there's one that's going to explode, not including Kareem Hunt, but one of the two that's currently on the active roster, it would be Steele. You take your shot on the upside there. Jordan Love practicing for the first time since spraining his MCL just under 2 weeks ago against the Eagles.
Hopefully they're not rushing him back too soon.
They said there was optimism he could be back sooner rather than later, although they did get a win last week with Malik Willis at the helm. Malik Willis came from Tennessee. Packers' opponent this week is Tennessee. Maybe there's a revenge game and bring him back. And, that looks to be the bulk of the news for this week.
That was enough.
Oh, wait. Big news here. Dolphins have released wide receiver Robbie Chosen. Got to make sure that gets called out because he is awful.
He was chosen to be off the team.
Yeah. The tribe has spoken. Get off the island. That's a reference that I'm too young to do, or maybe too old to do. I don't even know. Anyways, let's go through the games in some detail. Not going to recount the Thursday night game because we did that last week. Bills 31, Dolphins 10. Tua has no brain anymore, as it is mashed potatoes. And the Bills
Dolphins were...
Although they did bring Tyler Huntley from the Ravens, a former Pro Bowl somehow quarterback. Signed him off the practice squad. It looks like it is going to be Skylar Thompson for this week. And the Dolphins 1-1. Tua can't come back until, I believe, week number 8 due to the IR designation and their bye week. So if the Dolphins get by at 500 going to week 8, maybe the season is not lost if he does come back and he's healthy. But with Tua, you really don't know what's going to happen with his brain after that. Raiders beat the Ravens 26-23. The Ravens fall to 0-2. It really seems like this team does not know how to use their offensive weapons or make critical stops on defense. Derrick Henry disappointing. Zay Flowers disappointing. Lamar Jackson not terrible, but to let the Raiders come from behind and beat you when that game was all but over. Not a good look for the Ravens, who are 0-2. just like we all expected.
Yeah, I mean, how many people saw that Gardner Minshew would come in on the fourth quarter for a big road win? I mean, yeah, we just that was exactly like the script had it all planned out because you looked at this game. I mean, how many people got bit in the posterior by? Oh yeah, let's see. Baltimore at Las Vegas. Yeah, I'm gonna pick Baltimore in the survival pool this week because Raiders don't seem to be that stable of a team. And then what the bleep was that, Raven?
I mean, we're still trying to figure out who is a good team. The Raiders lost last week to the Chargers. And the Chargers are 2-0. Speaking of teams you should be picking in your survivor pool, whoever's playing Carolina, that is who you should be picking in your survivor pool because Carolina looks terrible. Of course, Bryce Young has been
The
benched.
the curse of remember when Carolina had that stupendous augmented reality panther that put out on the field and ooh look at this technology.
Yeah, that might be the high point for the Panthers in the
Might
last
want to
five,
actually be a
6 years.
good franchise first.
Well, you got to have good ownership to do that. But the Chargers win 26-3. Bryce Young is officially benched. Long time in his career. I think the Panthers are an absolute dumpster fire, and they're bringing Andy Dalton to start. I don't know if that's going to be any better. The offensive line is terrible. They don't have a good running game right now. They don't have time to pass. Some of these receivers, you think Deontay Johnson's good. You know, Adam Thielen used to have a lot of skill. He's getting a little bit older. Xavier Legette, maybe he's a guy you don't know yet. You can't find out. So they're going to see what they've got in Andy Dalton, but the Panthers fall to 0-2 very predictably. The Chargers, yes, it's the Raiders. Yes, it's the Panthers. It's two teams we didn't necessarily think were going to be that good, but the Chargers, double-digit wins the first 2 weeks over those two teams, going to 2-0. The defense looks much better. The running game looks good. And we even got Quentin Johnson, 2 touchdowns in week number 2. And I don't know if it's the start of his finally going to break out in year number 2 or if it's just, hey, it was the Panthers, but a little bit of hope there for him.
You know it's not a good defense when you make Quentin Johnson and J.K. Dobbins look like absolute super studs.
It's worth reminding everybody that Quentin Johnson was a first-round drafted wide receiver. There is going to still be some talent that there's hope for. I don't think it's going to be a great fantasy asset, but he could pan out to be a good NFL asset for this year. And then as this team gets a little bit better, maybe a little bit more talent around.
Chuba Hubbard was the slim, very, very lone bright spot on offense.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the Panthers, unless you're extremely desperate
Johnson, Adam Thielen, I mean,
yeah, I traded away a lot of Deontay Johnson before he got traded to Carolina, and I still have him in one league that I'm still trying to get rid of him in. Dynasty, nobody wants him just because this situation is so bad. I do think the Panthers, this has to be bottoming out with Bryce Young being as bad as he is. This offense, defense just not playing well. We knew the Panthers weren't going to be good, but I think even those of us who follow football pretty closely are surprised with how bad this team looks after a year that we were thinking in the offseason they might grow somewhat from last year, but they look worse than they were last year. I know it's a new head coach and system and scheme, and maybe it gets better. But right now, the Panthers look very, very bad.
And Tepper is being called Daniel Snyder 2.0.
Yeah, he needs to go, but owners rarely can get fired. On the other end of the NFC South is the highest scoring team in the NFL, the New Orleans Saints, the team we all expected to be having 40-plus points in the first 2 games. Yes, last week against the Panthers, 47-10 to go. Well, it's the Panthers. Let's see how they do next week against Dallas. Dallas is a good team, and they win 44-19 in a game that's not that close. Derek Carr, I don't know where this Derek Carr came from, but this is the first time we've seen him in the NFL where he is leading. He's the number 1 fantasy quarterback right now. I don't know how long you trust it. Rashid Shaheed is the number 2 wide receiver in fantasy football right now. This Saint Galvin Kamara, I think, has to be the running back 1 through 2 weeks. I'll quickly check and see if I can figure that out on the fly. But 4 touchdowns for Kareem Hunt, shades of the Christmas Day game a couple years back. And it just looks like the Saints are a team that we may have grotesquely underestimated. Yes, Alvin Kamara in a half-point PPR is 17 points clear of Saquon Barkley, who's second.
Yeah, because Alvin Kamara just ran absolutely wild and crazy. As you're not prepared for saying the Saints have the best offense in the league right now. Derek Carr is a fantasy and number one quarterback until further notice. You know, what reality are we living in?
Yeah, and they get the Eagles this week. That Eagles pass defense, we saw what happened at the end of that game. Once Kirk Cousins started playing well, we saw Jordan Love tear him up pretty good. Derek Carr might be an absolute league winner, which is funny because I do remember telling a couple weeks back before the season started, I made a trade to get Bo Nix, the Bo Lever here, and Matthew Stafford because I thought there was a potential between bye weeks and injuries. I would have to go to Derek Carr, and now I'm sitting there going, I mean, I'm not benching Josh Allen, who's my one, but if something happens, I have Derek Carr, and I shouldn't feel good about that. Historically speaking, I shouldn't. At least this year so far, so good. But Cowboys get blitzed. They're doing what they did last year, where they either pound teams or get pounded. Not a good week for them.
Is
Home game.
is Mike McCarthy getting his suitcase out of the closet?
They're not going to fire Mike McCarthy during the season unless this team falls to like 2-6 or something. They'd really have to fall apart. But if they don't win a playoff game or make a deep NFC championship game type of run, even if the talent is not necessarily there,
You can
again,
imagine
Rico Dowdle, Zeke Elliott in the backfield, it's not a great situation.
you can imagine the texts from Jerry Jones were not pleasant.
Yeah, he expects better, and I think everybody expected better from the Cowboys last week. I know we both picked them, and credit to the Saints. They earned the jersey wear for me today because they've just been the surprise for me. They've been the surprise of the NFL. The close
Yeah,
second we'll get to
Bucks,
in a little bit would be the Vikings to me.
Bucks and Saints lead the division, and then you have the Falcons and Panthers floundering.
Yeah, but you expected the Bucks to be a good team. They've won the division a couple years in a row. There were a lot of people picking the Saints to be the worst team in this division. And again, this has
I
the
was
Panthers in the
one of them.
division. I thought the Panthers would still be worse, but I thought the Saints were not going to be that far ahead. And right now, they look like they might be the class of the NFL. The other surprise team, again, Minnesota Vikings with Sam Darnold. I think we all thought, okay, maybe they beat the Giants, but we'll get to their game here in a little bit as they also moved to 2-0. Let's talk about your Bucks going into Ford Field and beating the Lions. The Lions did shoot themselves in the foot in a couple ways, but the Buccaneers took care of business when they needed to. Big time defensive plays, big offensive drives to respond to touchdowns that the Lions had. Aiden Hutchinson, though, for the Lions, I think 4.5 to 5 sacks on the game, just absolute game record, but not enough as the Lions fall 20-16 to the Buccaneers. Lions at 1-1, you know they're going to get every team's best shot, but the Buccaneers, I think this is an early statement win. Again, you look at the Saints in week 1, oh, they beat the Panthers. Well, Tampa beat Washington. They beat them convincingly. To follow it up with a Super Bowl favorite in the NFC and beat them like this, good sign for the Bucs early on.
Yeah, as to all of a sudden, just even though it definitely hurt Mike Evans' fantasy value this week, it was nice to see the
Chris
resurgence of
Godwin.
one Chris Godwin coming back, looking like the Cooper Cup of Tampa Bay, borderline WR1, and definitely one of the biggest values right now for the wide receivers in all of the NFL. Baker Mayfield definitely added value with his legs, and definitely looks like he has arrived as a low QB1, picking up where he left off last season. And right now, if you want to trade somehow, he is the quarterback that you were the one that maybe you took ahead of him, and he's the one to have now. So just yeah, and a little bit of a concern for, of course, Rashad White, who had his insane second half last season, left with the groin injury, caught one pass, and uh, Bucky Irvin wasn't particularly impressive, and for right now, could be a running back by committee that gives us not any real reliable weekly play until Rashad White gets healthier from this injury. And when the offense is clicking like this, you don't like even seeing a small hiccup, and you're trying to wonder what was going on with Jared Goff. He could move the ball, but he couldn't finish the drives, and it was very disappointing.
Yeah, I think part of this is Sam Laporta has kind of disappeared in this offense. We have seen Jameson Williams pop off, but I think especially in the red zone, Laporta has to be more involved. A big body target, great
And
hands.
Gibbs didn't even score.
I mean, this was not the best game for the Lions. I think they'll be fine. You're going to see early season again. No one has preseason games with their starters anymore. You're going to see teams slowly get going. I think the Lions will be just fine. But again, the Bucs seeing Chris Godwin. I think Godwin had every reception for the first quarter and a half the Buccaneers had.
That was just, even with it hurting Mike Evans this week, that was so nice to see that, especially after all the problems last year.
At least now you know if you have Chris Godwin, you have a potential for a monster week once again. Where last year, I don't think you thought that at any point in time. And we move on to the Colts might not be very good. They lose to the Packers 16-10. Behind Malik Willis, that's a lot worse than it would sound if it was Jordan Love. Offensively, they really couldn't get anything going. Anthony Richardson looked like a rookie, which again, he's only had a handful of games last year before getting injured, and then 2 starts this year. Josh Jacobs, great game for the Packers, did have a fumble, but all in all, almost 150 yards on the ground. He's going to be a focal point of this offense, at least while Jordan Love is out. And I think they need to make that running game a focal point with all of those wide receiver 1B, wide receiver 2 type of talents at the wide receiver position. All very good players, but not necessarily an alpha like you've got in Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Tyreek Hill. I think if you can focus on the ground game, force them to respect that first, you can pick apart a defense when Jordan Love comes back. But the Packers, behind Malik Willis, get a surprising win at home over the Colts. The Colts 0-2. They hung tough with both the teams, the Texans in week number 1, the Packers in week number 2. Both are very good teams, well-rounded. Even the Packers with Malik Willis are a solid team. I think there's some concern for the options on the Colts not named. Jonathan Taylor and Anthony Richardson is a fantasy asset. It's going to be fine. But Michael Pittman, are you really happy about that one at all?
Yeah, because just for some reason, just Pittman and Richardson just are not clicking at all.
Again, he is in his 7th start. There's a lot of players that it takes time to get on the same page. I just think you got to have a little bit of patience with the Colts, but it might not be the season they were hoping.
I think this qualifies for Richardson as a learning experience.
Yeah, unfortunately, he did miss games before he got injured and out for the rest of the season last year. So he only played in 5 games, only started, I think, 2 of them, or only finished 2 of them, I should say. I think he started all 5. But he's still got a lot to learn. And now that he's back healthy and getting some game experience, I think it's going to be good for him. But the Colts are going to suffer this year.
How about Pierce?
Yeah.
Scored
Next.
Again?
What's that?
Scored again.
Yeah. All right, next up. Yeah, he's there's not enough passing volume to trust Alec Pierce, but he has been the go-to deep threat target. And when Anthony Richardson hits on those deep balls, it's Rashid Shaheed from last year. When he hits, you're going to be happy you got him in your lineup. When not, he's going to hurt.
He's just sort of like throwing up passes up there, and you hope one of them sticks.
Yeah, he is. He's like someone trying to be Steph Curry, just launching threes, but doesn't have the range or the accuracy, I should say, because Anthony Richardson has one of the strongest arms in football. All right. Anyways, moving on. The Cleveland Browns beat the Jacksonville Jaguars 18-13 as the Jaguars.
Deshaun Watson is still uninspiring at quarterback.
But he was better this week than he was last week. The Jaguars have been uninspiring on offense most of the season. Their defense looks okay, but Travis Etienne hasn't gone crazy. Evan Ingram left the warm-up with a hamstring injury. So, unfortunately, I did trade him away in a dynasty for a 2nd-round pick next year. And then I woke up on Sunday and was like, wait a minute, why don't I have the opposite offer back to? Oh, he's hurt now. Well, all sales final. Enjoy that guy on your bench. But the Jaguars, Brian Thomas looks like the only offensive weapon on this team that at the wide receiver position has a shot of being fantasy relevant this year. Christian Kirk has been terrible. Gabe Davis is Gabe Davis. He's not going to do anything for you.
Yeah, the Browns was Foreman over Ford.
Yeah, I think double the carries, but less of the efficiency. So we'll see how that goes soon. I think you're starting to panic about Amari Cooper. He was outplayed by Jerry Jeudy and Elijah Moore this week. He does not look like he is on. He's getting a lot of targets, so maybe things will get better. It was a rainy day in Jacksonville, but a little bit of concern for Amari Cooper because you probably drafted him, and I'm one of those people that drafted him in the 5th, 6th, 4th round, somewhere in that range, depending on your league.
Is Jerry Jeudy
He's
worth
hurting.
even keeping at this point?
I think if in the 16-team league, if Jeudy is on waivers, he needs to be picked up.
But
If you need a wide receiver,
but
if you
10-team
need,
league, no way.
in a 10-team league, you can probably leave him and wait another week. He was good last week. He wasn't good the week before, but he's been outplaying Amari Cooper. He's been outplaying David Njoku, who missed the game. He's been outplaying pretty much everybody on the wide receiver core of that team. So it might be a trend that continues. I just don't know how worthwhile the number one receiver in Cleveland's going to be. Hopefully for the Browns, they play the Giants next weekend and they can kind of get their offense going.
Any confidence going forward for Bigsby?
No, he left the game with an injury, but he was used well against Miami. He wasn't used heavily, but he was used in a very efficient way against Miami. We'll see if he can do it again down the line, but he is definitely the backup to ETN. He's going to have some opportunities, but not someone who's going to be fantasy relevant even in our 16-team league, barring an injury to Travis Etienne. I think if you're a Browns fan, you have to hope that, okay, Deshaun Watson looked capable. He looked competent. He didn't look great, but he looked better. And again, Watson's only
You're
played at
stuck with
most.
them Browns fans.
Yeah. Watson's only played at most 6 games in a year since 2020. If he can play consistently, I think he will get better and better over time. Hopefully, this is a step in that direction for the Browns. If you hate Deshaun Watson because he's an absolute awful person off the field, then you're rooting against that. But the Jaguars fall to 0-2, and a lot of weird teams at 0-2 that we wouldn't have necessarily expected. Next up, the Vikings, the second most surprising team in my estimation, beating the San Francisco 49ers 23-17. Of course, the 49ers, no Christian McCaffrey, who was officially on IR. Deebo Samuel now going to be missing the next couple of weeks. It's really quickly becoming Jordan Mason, Brandon Ayuk, and George Kittle in the wide receiver and tight end and weapons category. Yeah, maybe Jennings, and there might be someone else that steps up. But this 49ers offense is going to look very different for the next few weeks. I do expect them to be fine when everything comes back together. But for the second straight week, the Vikings offense looks pretty good with Sam Darnold. The defense looks like it's taking a huge step in the correct direction for the Vikings under Brian Flores. And Sam Darnold, I don't think he'd be your number one because I think that would go to Derek Carr. But I think if you listed your top 5 MVP candidates as of now in the 2024 season, I think he's a top 3 guy. It's only 2 games, long way to go. But can you think of beyond Derek Carr, who you would right now put in that race above Sam Darnold?
Maybe Baker?
I mean, Baker would be in consideration. Maybe a Kyler Murray or a Josh Allen. Not that Allen's had to do anything. Kyler Murray had a big game both weeks. It's just, if you really look at it, Sam Darnold might be number 2 in early season MVP races. And that's something I don't think anybody in their right mind would have saw coming.
And how about the Aaron Jones fumbling at the goal line? Otherwise, it would have been a really big week. And you also have to wonder, does Ty Chandler even need to be rostered right now?
Not in most leagues. Again, deeper leagues, more of these guys become relevant. But this one, even the 16-team, I don't think he's rostered. And I don't know if he needs to be.
Jordan Mason is definitely for real.
Yeah, Jordan Mason, if you have Christian McCaffrey, like I do in the Sports Shuffle League, the fact that I was able to pick him up on game day and throw Jordan Mason in the lineup, and he's been very good each of the next 2 weeks, it makes it acceptable that Christian McCaffrey is missing time. I wish I would have picked him up in the 16-teamer where I have Kenneth Walker and Isaiah Pacheco, who are one's out for 6 to 8 weeks and one with an oblique injury. We'll see how long it takes for him to come back. We'll talk about the Seahawks in a second.
And in Dynasty conversation, because right now you still have Jordan Addison, you have a little Jalen Naylor conversation.
Jalen Naylor in Dynasty needs to be rostered. I don't know how much value there's going to be. If you're a competitive team, a team that thinks they have a shot to win, he's not going to make your lineup. But if you are my, no punt 0-2 team that's a full rebuild up there, Jalen Naylor would be a great asset to throw in your lineup if you've got him because, well, he's going to be better than several other options like Josh Palmer and
Uh,
Luke Musgrave. And yeah,
yeah.
it's a bad team. It's a full rebuild for a reason. Started that about a year ago, and it's kind of bottoming out right now. Yeah, when Bucky Irving is your number 2 running back,
Mhm.
you've got a problem. Chris Godwin is my number 1 wide receiver, and Chris Godwin had a great week, but number 1 wide
Yeah,
receiver is not ideal.
yeah, it's not going to be every week because when Mike Evans ends up having the feast at the table, Godwin usually suffers.
Yeah, and my 2 flexes in there are Miles Sanders and Justice Hill, and they are the best options I have.
Yikes.
So, but it's got I think 3 firsts, 3 seconds, 3 thirds for next year. It's already got Benson and Corum and a few other young receivers. It's got Bo Nix. Yeah, I am a believer, I guess. I am a bona fide Bo.
You need a hat that says that now.
Yeah. Purdy's my number 1, though, so it's not like he's my starter by any means. But yeah. A lot of youth on that team. But that's what a rebuild's supposed to be 3-1s, 3-2s, 2-3s for right now.
I mean, if we could get away with it somehow without getting any DMCA strikes, we'd need to have like a crafted sound bite, with the monkey song, but instead
I'm a
of
believer.
yeah,
Yeah.
Ryan,
Anyways, let's move on to.
Ryan would be like, I saw his face and I'm a believer.
Yeah. Anyways, let's move to the overtime game of the week. The Seahawks, who are first place in the NFC West
Yet
at 2
another
0,
surprise.
23-20 win over the surprising New England Patriots, who are still 1-1. They won week 1 against the Bengals, almost won week 2 against the Seahawks. We thought the Patriots were going to be one of the worst teams in football. They were projected that way. Vegas had them that way. Patriots might be one of those sneaky competitive teams. I don't think they're good enough to take the Bills down in the division.
The Pac-Man for the Seattle Seahawks that did all the nom nom waka 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 was definitely Zach Charbonnet.
Yeah, Charbonnet not super efficient, but did get the job done. DK Metcalf had a pretty good week. Ramondre Stevenson for the Patriots. Zach Charbonnet, if Walker misses against Miami, I think he becomes a must play. If Walker comes back, you might be able to get away with more of a timeshare. When Walker is healthy, he is the number 1 on this team, and Charbonnet is not playable. But first week back coming off the oblique injury, if there's any doubt, it should be a timeshare at a minimum. The Patriots, though, I do want to say that this is a team that plays the Jets tomorrow night on Thursday Night Football. Loser of that game goes to last place in the division, and I'm not so sure it's the Patriots that lose that game because they've been playing exceptionally well. The defense has been good. The Jets have not looked great at
Two
times.
linemen out, I think, already for the Pats, if I remember hearing the radio today.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a good situation, but we've seen the Jets not look particularly good, even though they are also 1-1. I don't know. Maybe the Patriots are not what we thought they were in a better way, but the Seahawks, first place in the NFC West, 2-0, and this is a team a lot of people thought might end up on the bottom of the division. Early season returns have been pretty good.
Who would have thunk? I mean, Jacoby Brissett looking good.
I mean, he's a veteran quarterback. He's got enough talent to be dangerous when he's on a good roster. He's been solid. The problem is no one thought the Patriots had that good of a roster. And maybe, Gerard Mayo's a great head coach, and maybe these wide receivers are going to pan out just fine. This defense is going to just be too good to be blown out. But they're hanging around.
Is Hunter Henry sustainable?
I think not to the extent he was this week, where he had almost 3/4 of the passing yards for the New England Patriots. But I do think he is going to be viable. I mean, we've seen a lot of bad tight ends. Travis Kelce, Sam Laporta, Dalton Kincaid has been disappointing. Mark Andrews has been disappointing. When you look at a lot of those drafted guys, Trey McBride's right now the best of them with a touchdown. Kyle Pitts had a terrible week in week number 2. I think a guy like Hunter Henry at least has to be considered. I mean, Brock Bowers is the only other one that really would jump off the possibly not drafted and into a solid starting role for the Raiders. But I think Hunter Henry at least has to be considered in some leagues to be an option. He is my starting tight end in the terrible team I just mentioned, but he's a
What
solid enough player.
what about Gibson or Polk?
I don't think Gibson is. I just think Ramondre Stevenson's got too much work. Polk, I need to see more. He's going to have good weeks. He's going to have bad weeks. It's still an offense that I think is going to be capped. I don't see this team putting up 35, 40 points offensively. If they do, I think a defensive or a special teams touchdowns involved in some way, shape, or form. So you're not going to have those big boom weeks like you saw from Kamara, from anybody on this roster, or from Barkley, or we haven't had a big wide receiver breakout yet. Marvin Harrison, I mean, we did see that. We'll get to that game in a little bit. But we're not going to see, I don't think we're going to see that from anybody on the New England Patriots this season. All right, moving on to the Jets, 24-17 over the Tennessee Titans. Will Levis just looks like he loves to throw football games away. Second week in the row, he's made a boneheaded play that's kind of cost the Titans the game. The Jets did not look good for large stretches of this game, but they did enough to get the job done. Garrett Wilson starting to be some concern. You can say Snead was on him, and maybe that's part of the problem, but he hasn't done it for fantasy reasons. I think he's a good, talented wide receiver. I just don't necessarily think he is the guy, a true alpha dog number one that you can count on. But the Jets do move to 1-1. They do play Thursday night to go to 2-1 against the New England Patriots. One of those teams is going to be 2-1 for sure, unless a tie, which would be not great. But the Titans, Tony Pollard looks like the number one running back. Calvin Ridley had a really good game in a really weird way, a rushing touchdown and just a miraculous touchdown catch between like three defenders where he catches it, rolls into the end zone. But I think the Titans, they really need to consider going to Mason Rudolph. I don't think Will Levis is the guy. I think he is just not that good. Maybe he's thinking about mayo too much. Maybe he's thinking about how he can eat bananas with peels on them like he does because he's kind of a weird dude. But he doesn't seem to be thinking, how do I win this football game? He seems to be thinking, how do I lose this football game with my decision making? And he's done it 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah. Calvin Ridley did the most he could with the very, very limited opportunities. He's the only pass catcher I think worth rostering on this offense, and can be playing.
I don't think you cut Hopkins yet, but it's getting to the point where you have to think about it.
I dropped Tajay Spears in one league. He left with an ankle injury, has a chance to play in week 3, but pretty much the nom is going to Pollard as he's going to be the lead back, and I don't know how much value Spears really has in the first half.
Not much. Right now, Calvin Ridley in full PPR is the wide receiver 16 on the season, so that's better than you would have expected. He's been solid. 8 points a week, number one. If he keeps it up, it's going to be because he's the only option, I think. But only time will tell. And let's move on to Giants Commanders. I thought this could be a sneaky high-scoring or sneaky low-scoring game. Kind of got one right in the middle. Washington wins 21-18, and 7 field goals for Washington to win. And the Giants had 3 touchdowns where they didn't convert the extra point.
Yeah, just to, you're saying moving on to a game. It's not a better game. In fact, it's a worse game. So just not a lot right now that you can really trust on the Giants. As Daniel Jones, you're just wondering what's going on. He's as absolutely as off the ropes. He has some questionable value, maybe in a 2-quarterback super flex leagues, but oh my God, I think you have to be really, 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 question of having no need and need no have. But oh Lord, he's good enough to feed Malik Neighbors some, but
Malik Neighbors 18 targets in this game.
Just
say what you want about Dan Jones, but at least he knows where to throw the damn football.
Yeah, it's called throw to the guy that you got in the first round. Yeah. Singletary ran well and showed, week's 1 dud was more about the game script. You had Wendell Robinson scored, but his target share came crashing back to earth, back to life, back to reality, and just Jaden Daniels looks good, but oh my God, just what it's the same offense that against the Bucks that the Bucks took a little while to get going, but when they got going, yeah, Commanders are not good.
Yeah, Malik Neighbors right now the wide receiver 3 on the season in full PPR. Chris Godwin number 1, Nico Collins number 2. It's early, one big game will do that, but the volume, the targets, 25 targets through 2 weeks. Very, very impressive stuff there. And if Daniel Jones keeps doing that, Daniel Jones will find success just doing that. And I have the Malik Neighbors Daniel Jones stack in a 2-0 Super Flex Dynasty League.
Sad to note is how much left does Terry McLaurin have?
I'm really trying to figure out whether it's Terry McLaurin or the fact that Jaden Daniels is a rookie quarterback who hasn't gotten the passing game down yet. He hasn't looked good through 2 weeks. The Commanders, they're not going to be an offensive juggernaut through the air. They can run the ball really well. Brian Robinson's been good. Austin Eckler, for what he is at this point, looks pretty solid. But I don't necessarily think that Taylor McLaurin is going to have a fair shake this year to be better. I don't think you can quite cut him yet. You expect maybe in error, but you do expect Jaden Daniels to get a little bit better passing the ball as the season goes along. And if he does, that has to go somewhere. Terry McLaurin is really the only option on the team. All right, moving on to the Arizona Cardinals. Absolutely annihilating the Los Angeles Rams. Marvin Harrison Jr., 1 catch for 4 yards week 1, 2 touchdowns and over 100 yards on 4 catches in week number 2. Trey McBride finds the end zone on a fumble recovery. James Conner into the end zone. Kyler Murray, a massive game. This Rams offense is going to struggle for a little while. They've lost a lot of offensive linemen. They've lost a lot of wide receivers. They've lost a lot on both sides of the ball. The Cardinals, I've been saying this is the team I think makes the biggest jump. I think they are going to be a playoff team. We saw what Buffalo did to Miami last week. Remember, Arizona should have probably beaten Buffalo week number 1, losing by 6, and then come in and blitz a division rival like this. Cardinals are going to have some tests coming forward, but at the same time, I really can't say anything too negative about how the Cardinals played this week. Defense looked a lot better. Offense looked fantastic. The Rams look a little bit lost, which when you lose your best 2 wide receivers kind of makes sense. But the Cardinals 1-1 and might just be scary.
Yeah, you can tell that Stafford was missing his top 2 targets when one of those targets was, Jordan Whittington. You're going, I have no idea who that is, but yeah, rough times ahead for the Ramalama Ding Dongs, folks.
Yeah, Rams, it's going to be very interesting to see if they can improve, if they can survive realistically when you are playing good opponents without your top 2 wide receivers, your offensive line being in shambles. The Rams, they play the San Francisco 49ers, who are looking for a bounce back. Another very injured team, so maybe it's going to be a more competitive game than it would sound like.
Marvin Harrison Jr. getting a little bit better.
Yeah, I mean, Marvin Harrison Jr. absolutely had a breakout performance. Again, second game, you expected better than 1 for 4 in week number 1, but I don't know if you expected, where is it? 4 receptions for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns. And that was because the game got out of hand. They didn't have to throw it anymore.
And F for anybody who had to start Mr. Dortch.
Yeah, that's usually a deeper dynasty play, but he was good in week number 1. I think he's going to have some pop-up weeks. The Cardinals offense, I think, is going to have some really good weeks and really good offensive opportunities and fantasy options. I think Dortch is one of them. Just when the game gets out of hand like this, some players are going to hurt, and this is a week where Dortch hurt quite a bit. Next up, Pittsburgh, 13-6 win over the Denver Broncos. Believe it or not, the Broncos lost again. Defense looks fantastic for the Broncos. The offense still has a way to go. Unfortunately for the Broncos, they just don't have a good running game. They don't have offensive weapons on the outside. So, as good as Bo Nix, I think, will be, I do think it's going to be a rough year just because the weapon and talent around him is not there. They need to build and grow and get better, get more talent in the offseason. Remember, they're still paying $40 million or so for Russell Wilson to sit on the bench for their opponent last weekend as the emergency quarterback. But the Steelers behind Justin Fields, their offense has looked absolutely abysmal, worse than it was last year with Matt Canada, 31 points in 2 games, but they are 2-0. An exceptional defense will do that for you. We'll see what happens when they play the Chargers, who are also 2-0 next week.
Yeah, because Justin Fields is going to remain the starter, which means that there's no reliable fantasy play right now in the offense. And man, you have to feel sorry if somebody was like, "Man, I'm going to let Russ cook, and he's going to be my QB1." And yeah.
I feel bad for anybody who drafted George Pickens, who thought, oh, this could be a wide receiver steal in the 5th, 6th round, wherever he went in your draft. Russell Wilson, I've got him in a dynasty league as my number 3 quarterback, so I definitely want him to be the starter because right now, without him, it's Andy Dalton, who was just picked up because he's now officially a starter behind Richardson and Allen.
It definitely sucks when his biggest play, when all of a sudden you see that and you're like, nom, 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 and all of a sudden it's wiped out by a big penalty. And but just hang on. I think better days are ahead for Mr.
Yeah, I do think Russell Wilson will eventually get his crack at the starting lineup. Once again, he is coming back from the calf injury. If the Steelers keep winning, they're not going to change things up, but I don't think it's sustainable to win by scoring less than 20, especially when you get past the game against the Chargers. I believe the schedule starts. I mean, once you play in the division, it's going to get tougher. But I'll pull up some of their games here now. As the Steelers just their offense looks horrible after the Chargers. It's the Colts, Cowboys, Raiders, Jets. I mean, this could be a really bad stretch coming up. I think the Colts, Cowboys, Raiders, and Jets can all beat them. Giants, Commanders, then Ravens, Steelers, Bengals, and you're going to go Ravens, Browns, Bengals. Of course, Steelers aren't playing themselves, and then Browns, Eagles, Ravens, Chiefs, Bengals to end. So the last half of the season is a gauntlet. So the Steelers need to get healthy now, get their win total up. If they can, win 5 of their next 6, they're going to find a way to be above 500, but they're going to get pounded the second half of the season if this offense stays how it is right now. All right, next up, the Cincinnati Bengals fall to the Kansas City Chiefs 26-25. Another controversial pass interference. I mean, it was the right call, but it's the Chiefs. They get all the calls, so it's controversial. I was watching it at a hockey ring, and people going, "Oh, I don't like Taylor Swift." It's a football game, dude. Let's watch the football. It's her team. No, it's not her team.
That was the meme. Thank you all for coming back into our lives, and Taylor Swift is in the not you square.
Yeah, I don't mind that she's at games. I don't mind that she's rooting for the person she's with. I don't mind any of that. But for the love of God, TV, stop every time Travis Kelce does anything going to Taylor Swift. We don't need to see her jumping around like a crazy person. It's so bad they have her in Madden now. So anytime someone digitally does something with the Chiefs, you see her jumping around like a psychopath as Joel disappears on me. I don't have anything against her. Not a fan of her music, not my taste, but at the same time, can we stop the focus on her? But with that said, the Chiefs do win 26-25. The big loss is Isaiah Pacheco with the fractured fibula, out 6 to 8 weeks. We'll see what they do in the backfield as I try and let Joel in, but it's not letting me. Give me a second, as the whole system doesn't want to work. Yeah, I will let Joel in as soon as the thing lets me. Technology is fun. The Bengals, though, Zach Moss hasn't been great. Jamar Chase having temper tantrums. We saw Mike Gesicki be the target of choice. And yeah, it's been an interesting season as the Bengals go to 0-2. The Chiefs 2-0. Travis Kelce's been disappointing. We expect a lot more in the passing game to be coming up, as I think my computer is completely frozen. I don't know if anybody can see or hear me because my whole computer is locked up. This is fantastic.
Hold, please.